Welcome back to our podcast for February 25th. Handful of bills to go through this time. It's interesting as we get to the end of the session, things get busier, but sometimes the bills get further between because more and more bills start to hit the floor and the voting process and whatnot. So sometimes we have a whole bunch of bills hit at once, and sometimes we'll have a long gap where they're waiting their turn to come up on the boards. So let's run through them real quick. So the first one we want to talk about is HB 214. This is the employer verification one. Representative Walter from Southern Utah brought this forward. This one's one that would reduce the requirement to use E-Verify from 150 down to 5. When it was first brought out, there was a lot of issues with it, a lot of concerns. He has worked through it. He's worked through a lot of different stakeholders to try and figure out how to make this work, that we don't want to encourage or make it look as though we're encouraging or having illegal people come to work. He took it to the committee because it was held in committee, which usually suggests we're dead. He brought it back to the committee and says, no, let's rehear this. I think I've got this worked out, and I believe he thought he had all of the votes. However, several of the committee members didn't show up, which isn't uncommon. They're called into other meetings or they're presenting in other committees, especially this time of year. If they have a bill to present, they may be in a different committee presenting their bill while this bill is being heard. Ultimately, it failed in committee. Some of the people who spoke against it that I thought was interesting, we had the wool growers out of Cache Valley. They came, small association, not a ton of members, but they're saying we already have a fairly high burden to make sure the people we bring in are legal because they bring them in on special visas. So he says, we're already doing this. And this is just one more layer, one more thing we have to do, and we would prefer not to do that. One thing that was pointed out by the committee is there's no enforcement mechanism and there's no oversight on it. So I guess that's good if you don't like it, because then you can say, well, I just choose not to do it. There's nobody watching you and there's no penalty if you don't. The problem is there's a certain, and I would argue significant percent of business people out there that they're going to comply with the law simply because it's the law. They're law-abiding, they follow the rules, they do everything they can to be legitimate with their business, and if they're told, here's what we have to do, they're going to do it. Those that are illegal won't. So it ends up being an additional burden on those who are already doing it right. I think one of the biggest issues was kind of along that same lines, is it's already unlawful conduct for a business owner to hire an illegal person. It could cost them their license. So the people that are doing this are already operating in the shadows. They are hiring people illegally. They're paying them illegally, and they don't show up anywhere. So the idea to say, well, your hiring process needs to change so that we make sure these are legal citizens or legal workers within the United States isn't going to matter because they're already hiring them illegal. They're already off the books. They don't count. It won't change their behavior. So the problem that we want to make everybody on an equal playing field still persists. We didn't fix it because the people that are doing it wrong will continue to do it wrong. Again, ultimately failed. I think it's a good notion. I think it's one we need to talk more about. We have talked with Representative Walter, very sharp guy. He's trying to come up with something to do in the future. So I'm sure we'll see something next year. I don't suspect we'll see anything this year, but in the future, we'll have to continue to look at this. Okay, so our next bill is House Bill 422. And interestingly enough, this is another one by Representative Walter. This one's one I just like to call the Rockville bill. This was a bill that would restrict this home in Rockville from being in the parade of homes. Obviously has generated a lot of emotion. Again, we've talked about it before. It's fascinating to me how many comments we got from people that said this isn't possible. There must be something wrong with the home. Not the case. I hope a bunch of you took the chance to go down there and look at it. It's a good home. It's not uncommon for cities to say, well, here's what we want to do. They have that power and they want to do it. So where we ended up with this is it did go to its second public hearing this week. It was a pretty quick hearing. There weren't a lot of comments. Nobody had a lot of questions, very, very few comments from the public, and it passed out unanimously. The League of Cities and Towns, which obviously it's their job to protect their cities and stuff, they had asked the sponsor to put in some additional language, which he did. He substituted the bill and put in new language, making it crystal clear that the cities still have the ability to regulate public safety things, that we need to be able to make sure that your standard traffic laws are obeyed, parking is obeyed, that we don't do things that become unsafe, which was never the case, nor would anybody just assume they could do that. But again, it makes sense to put it in the bill and make it clear that everybody understands. I think the idea was that he would make this amendment and that would make the league be kind of a neutral on it. Interestingly enough, they still got up and spoke unfavorably. They didn't go so far as to say we oppose the bill, but they said, no, there are still issues we want to continue to work on and make sure that it's safe. I don't anticipate there will be any additional changes to the bill, but it was interesting to me that you work through a deal and say, okay, here's what we're going to do to meet the needs, and then they're still not favorable of it. So anyway, did pass, is moving forward. At one point, there was discussion that maybe the bill would not move forward, that because Rockville ultimately backed down and said, okay, well, we're not going to have this guy arrested. We're not going to do all the things we threatened, that we may have gone too far, which, thank you to them, that was the right decision. But there, at one point, there was a thought that because they did that, this bill would go away. Both the sponsor and a number of legislators have said, no, this is actually good public policy. While we're moving forward with this, we should move forward with this. This shouldn't be an option that they can even ever have in the future. And it could be very detrimental to people selling homes and a variety of other things. So the bill is moving forward, and I see nobody with an interest to stop it that I imagine will move. It's had both its public hearings now. It's passed through the House. Now it's just waiting to go to the Senate floor. Once it gets voted on there, it's done. And I assume that's what will happen. This one, and I don't believe we have talked about this one, it's House Bill 442, and it's construction amendments by Tom Peterson. So Representative Peterson has a variety of construction-related bills, and so it's hard to not get them confused. This particular one has two main areas of interest in it. The first one is it will give linemen a path to become a general engineering contractor. So the reason that's important is because if you see what a lineman does, a lot of linemen, and we have a lot of private companies that do lineman work, but they can run all of the high voltage in the street. They can run it to the transformer. They can do all of that work with the high voltage. Once it hits the transformer and it goes from the transformer to the home, they can no longer do that. So there's an argument to be made, and I agree with this argument, that they have the training and the expertise to run all of this line. While they're there with the equipment and everything else, it makes sense that they may want to run that lateral. They may want to place that conduit and run that line from the transformer into the house. And the only reason they can't isn't because they don't have the expertise to do it. It's because they don't have the license classification to do it. So this would say that because they have completed a full apprenticeship, which it started out as 8,000 hours, it actually amended back to 7,000 hours. I don't fully understand that amendment, but I don't think it gives us any worry. That's still a 3.5-year apprenticeship where they're studying everything you need to do to deal with high voltage and electricity. They are running these lines underground, overhead, whatever. They're doing it all the time anyway, just not from transformer to the house. So it just said if they've done that, they meet the qualifications that they can get that license and be able to do all of that work, which seems to make sense to me. I didn't hear anybody speak against that. There were a couple of questions from the committee just trying to wrap their head around what exactly is the difference between a lineman and an electrician and a general engineering contractor, and how do those all mash together? Because if you're not in the industry, it obviously does get a little complicated. Anyway, so that part went through just fine. The other part deals with the HVAC contractors. A number of years ago, the whole licensing process was eased up significantly. And And there's a push now to say, and it's coming from legislators, it's to say, we believe that HVAC contractors, because of the high risk type part of the construction they do, because think about it, they have poisonous gas when they're done. If they have vented your furnace incorrectly, you fill the house with carbon monoxide and it's deadly. You could kill somebody. They also are dealing with a lot of times water if they're doing the boilers. Now, once it goes to the culinary, you have to be a plumber, but there's still parts of the boiler system they deal with. Probably more concerning is they deal with gas and electricity at the same time in the same device. So if they do it poorly, you've got gas that's incredibly flammable and electricity that can easily create a spark, and that becomes problematic. So this bill is to say, if you're going to be an HVAC contractor, what you need to do is have 2 years experience, not just in construction like a lot of the other specialty licenses. This has to be in HVAC. You need to be doing this. And then there will also be a test that you'll have to pass a test to do this. So this one's got a little bit more conversation going on it, just because it does change things a little bit, and everybody's trying to understand. Part of the bill that came out this past week removed the ability for a general contractor to self-perform the HVAC. So that's creating some conversation, and I don't know, there's actually a meeting happening right now to decide whether or not that amendment stays in or not. We have made some argument that it should be removed because we have contractors that will do small jobs. You'll do a basement finish or a little add-on or something simple that's not a complete redo of the HVAC system. It may just be cutting in another return or moving a return or cutting in another heat duct to make something work. And especially get into rural areas, but even across the Wasatch Front, sometimes it's okay for the general to just be able to do this. This would actually restrict them, and they would have to bring in an HVAC guy, even if that's all they were doing. If they were just, because they moved a wall, they're moving the return on that wall on a small remodel, they would have to have an HVAC guy do that. So there's an argument to be made that they should still have the ability to self-perform. There's already a requirement built into your contractor's license, the law, that says if you do anything that is beyond your ability or knowledge, that's unprofessional conduct. And again, that could impact your ability to keep a license. So it doesn't give a general contractor the ability to go out and become a full-blown HVAC contractor, unless, of course, they have that experience and knowledge and they can do it properly. So I don't know. We'll see where that one goes. We'll continue to watch it. I do believe the bill will continue to move forward. We just need to clean up that stuff. HB 499 is Department of Environmental Quality amendments. This bill was a pretty good bill to start with. One of them it's got that we really liked is it dealt with the ultra low NOx water heaters. There's been a couple of attempts over the last few years to eliminate the ultra low NOx water heaters. When they were put in, there were all kinds of assertions made that they won't cost anymore. They'll still function as well. They make a huge difference to the environment. None of that has really played out to be true. They do cost more. There is anecdotal evidence that would suggest that they don't last as long. Their warranty periods are less than what a normal water heater is. Just reaching out to plumbers across the state, we got significant reports that the longevity of them is less. And I haven't seen any statistics that show where we have a measurable decrease in NOx in the atmosphere because we have made this change. Now, it's hard to show something that didn't happen, but if you can see trend lines of what has been happening and how it works, you can look and say, okay, well, if we made a big change, then we should see a change in that trend line. I personally don't see it, but maybe somebody that's more really in the weeds on this has something that they could provide. So far, we haven't seen it. So that part is good. What it did is it removed the ultra low NOx requirement in any areas of the state that are in attainment. So attainment means EPA sets a standard that your air quality has to be this at this level. If your air quality deteriorates to something below that, then they say you're in non-attainment. When you become non-attainment, then you have a whole new set of requirements that you have to meet to try and get into attainment, which is originally why the ultra low NOx water heater was put in, is because it was one of the state's efforts to say, look, here's how we're trying to get into attainment. So right now our non-attainment areas are basically the Wasatch Front and Tooele County. Everywhere else in the state, if and when this bill goes through, no longer have to use the ultra low NOx water heaters. They will be able to just put in a regular water heater. So that's a partial win that we'll take it. The bad part on it for us is we had an amendment in here for asbestos. And we've talked about this before, that the asbestos, the Division of Air Quality in the state of Utah has made a rule, and there's actually a section in the law that supports it. I think it's poorly, and it needs to be clarified, and this would have clarified it and said what it was. But it says that even on a new home, if you disturb more than 3 square feet of material doing a remodel, you have to have the house inspected. According to Division of Air Quality, you cannot see the asbestos. So the only way to inspect is you have to have it tested. It has to be inspected, and again, I'm going to say by default tested by a certified person. So they have to attend certain classes, and they have to meet what is necessary for their requirements to be able to provide that testing. I had a builder, it cost him thousands of dollars and weeks in delay to do this for a really small remodel. And think about the problem on this. If you're a builder, you build a home, the people move in, and in the process of moving in, they do some damage. Or let's say they get in and somebody does something and causes a small flood. And so the home is like brand new, 2 weeks old, and they've done something that has messed up some sheetrock. You being a good contractor, go in and say, hey, we're going to help make this right. We're going to fix it. You would have to do an asbestos check, do the testing on that, even though you and your crews just left the house 2 weeks ago. So it really is a problem. Problem with this bill is that amendment that we had in got pulled out at the last minute. Just my opinion. I have nothing to base this on. But my opinion is to get the water heater deal through without the Division of Air Quality getting up and speaking hard and complaining. This was a compromise, which happens all the time. Says, okay, we're going to pull this out, but we're going to keep this in, and you're going to let it go. There is a brand new, in fact, he was just confirmed 2 days ago, a brand new director of the Environmental Quality Department. So I'm going to assume a lot of people are trying to work more friendly arrangements with him and say, no, we want to find a way to work through these issues rather than fight all the time. Totally my guess, but I believe that's what happened. Nonetheless, ours got pulled out. Next one, HB 151. This is home sales amendments by Representative Galen Benyon. This bill, and I don't remember exactly what the language is. You'll have to forgive me. I call it a cooling off period. In short, it says that if you're going to sell a home, you have to give the first 30 days kind of a first right of refusal to somebody who's going to live in and own the home. The idea is that we have these big corporate buyers that come in and buy big swaths of homes and turn them into homes for rent. And by doing that, it reduces the number of home ownership. And there is just a mountain of statistics that say home ownership is how you build strong, healthy communities. We have no arguments with those statistics. They're 100% true. And part of our mission as the Home Builders Association is to continue to drive that home ownership. So the intent of this bill is great. The problem is kind of the execution of how we would do this, that to say, well, you can't sell to a willing buyer for 30 days becomes problematic on a number of fronts. So the people who spoke in favor of this, all of them spoke from the position of I'm trying to get a house, or I just got a house, or my kid wants to get a house. But they were all saying, look, housing is so unaffordable and it's so hard to get. Housing moves so quick. We don't have an opportunity to bid on the houses, and so we're unable to get it. They didn't have a lot of statistical data to link I can't get a house to 30 days being held in reserve on the market, that it would help them. there was an assumption that the reason they can't get a house is because these big corporate buyers are coming in and buying everything that comes on the market and buying it for more than what they could pay for it. The reality is that's not true. We know how many homes are bought by corporate buyers, and it's like 3%. It's a tiny, tiny amount. So although it's a fair concern and what they're saying is true, it probably would be more correctly pointed at we get out-of-state buyers, and specifically California buyers, because of their inflated home prices. They're able to sell their home in California for many times more than what they paid for it. They come to Utah with a lot of cash, and they're able to cash out a home here. So they're able to have quicker closing and say, nope, we'll just pay what you're asking. We want the home and we want to do it. So their passion may be pointed in the wrong direction. The people that were opposing it had a variety of what I thought were more fact-based problems with it. One of them is that there are privacy requirements when you're selling a home, and they were put in place years ago, and they are to avoid discrimination. There are certain questions you can't ask. You can't dig into somebody's personal life when you're selling them a home to decide whether or not they meet your criteria to buy your home. Some of the questions you would have to ask to find out if this was a corporate buyer or an individual could get you really close to that line, and it could put some real estate agents in jeopardy of crossing that line, not intentionally, but get them to a position where you get in that gray area and it's just kind of scary. So there was the concern with that. The other one is the committee pointed out, though there is no enforcement, but there is a built-in way that if, let's say I'm in the military and I get transferred, and you don't even have to be in the military, my work transfers me, and they say, no, we need you in this place right now. I say the military because they could move people really, really quick, and they don't have any say in it. If you're working for corporate, I guess you could quit, but a lot of people aren't. They say, hey, we need you in Denver, and we need you there in 30 days. They need to sell the house and move to Denver. And there's a carve out if you have that kind of situation. There's nothing for anybody to say, well, I have to sell it really quick. It would also account for just, I have to have the money right now. I have bills. I need to sell the home. I need to have it moved quick. I could do that. So because that's in there, again, it's like one of the bills we talked about earlier. Those who are playing by the rules will play by the rules. Those who aren't. So it will put some sellers at a disadvantage because they're saying, okay, well, I have to hold it for 30 days. And they may lose a good sell during that 30 days. The other one is that there was an argument that things move too fast. So leaving it on the market for 30 days gives people a chance to buy it. Right now, the average time on the market for homes is like 50 days. So we already have an average time. Obviously, some move quicker, some move slower, but we do have an average in there that it's built in there. Another point, and this was made by one of the representatives on the committee who is very familiar with real estate. And in his opinion, right now the market is pretty balanced. He's saying, I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it's balanced. Now, in just the recent past, we've been able to see where the market was really, really hot, and that wasn't good. Prices were crazy, and we've seen where it's just completely dead, too cold, and that's not good. Right now, it's in pretty good balance. To have the government get involved and say, here, we're going to control how and when you sell, could upset that balance. So generally, government isn't really well equipped to make effective market decisions. So it's not a good thing for them to come in and start saying, well, here, we're going to get in the middle of a contract between a buyer and a seller and not have it actually kind of backfire on some things. Anyway, so those are the arguments that were made. Ultimately, it failed. I believe that Representative Bennion was disappointed. I think she is sincerely looking for some sort of a solution, and she believes this is it. Hopefully, between now and next session, we'll have time to talk to her, and maybe we can come up with a solution that we can support and she would feel comfortable to run. But I think a significant portion of the market, the people who deal in this world, are just not comfortable having government come in and put mandates, requirements, things like that on it. So for now, I think that one is dead. So that's our list for this week. We have a lot of bills that still have a long ways to go. We're down to a week and a half of the session, so things will move obviously much quicker. But most of them have either died and we know they're not moving forward, or they're up on the boards and they're moving quick. So hopefully we'll have a more extensive update next week.